HMP Wakefield is not known by its official name alone. Inside the UK prison system, it carries a darker reputation. Officers, journalists, and inmates alike have given it a nickname that rarely appears in government documents but is widely understood. They call it the Monster Mansion. This is the prison where Britain sends the men it believes cannot exist anywhere else. Serial killers, child murderers, terrorists, offenders whose crimes are considered so disturbing that ordinary prisons are deemed unsuitable. Wakefield is not designed for rehabilitation in the traditional sense. It is designed for containment. Located in West Yorkshire, Wakefield operates as a Category A prison, the highest security classification in the United Kingdom. Inmates held here are considered an extreme risk to the public, to staff, and sometimes to other prisoners. Escape is not just unlikely, it is unthinkable. But what truly defines Wakefield is not its walls or fences. It is the psychology of the men inside, and the system built to control them. From the moment an inmate is transferred to Wakefield, the atmosphere changes. Processing is slow, deliberate, and exhaustive. Backgrounds are scrutinized. Risk assessments are constant. Classification does not end at the gate. It follows inmates throughout their time inside. At Wakefield, no one is treated as ordinary. Cells are small and sparse, designed to remove comfort rather than provide it. Furnishings are minimal. Movement is restricted. Surveillance is constant. Inmates are rarely out of sight, and often out of contact. Unlike many prisons where inmates rely on numbers for protection, Wakefield isolates risk. Some prisoners are kept apart not because they are vulnerable, but because they are dangerous to everyone else. Association is carefully managed. Interaction is limited. This isolation is intentional. Wakefield houses inmates whose crimes provoke intense emotional reactions, not just from the public, but from other prisoners. Child killers, in particular, face constant threat in general population prisons. At Wakefield, separation becomes a method of survival. But separation has consequences. Inmates can spend long hours locked inside their cells, with limited human contact. Exercise periods are short and often solitary. Conversations are brief and monitored. Even within a prison, Wakefield creates layers of distance. The staff are trained accordingly. Officers at Wakefield are not there to build rapport. They are there to manage risk. Communication is formal. Authority is procedural. Emotion is discouraged. Force exists, but like at Belmarsh, it is not the primary tool. Control is achieved through structure, documentation, and restriction. Every incident is recorded. Every interaction is logged. Patterns matter. For inmates, this creates a constant awareness that nothing disappears. Wakefield is also home to prisoners serving whole life orders, sentences that guarantee they will never be released. For these inmates, the concept of rehabilitation loses meaning. There is no parole hearing waiting in the future. No opportunity to prove change. Life is measured only in survival. This reality shapes the prison's internal culture. Many inmates withdraw inward. Some fixate on routine. Others cling to rigid personal rules to maintain a sense of control in an environment where autonomy barely exists. Mental health issues are widespread. Many inmates arrive already damaged by trauma, abuse, or long histories of violence. Wakefield does not create these conditions, but it intensifies them. Psychological services are present, but limited. Treatment focuses on management rather than recovery. Stability is prioritized over progress. An inmate who remains calm is considered successful, even if underlying issues remain unresolved. Self-harm, depression, and emotional detachment are constant concerns. The prison responds with observation protocols and restrictions, not transformation. Again, the goal is containment. Wakefield's reputation has been built over decades, reinforced by the identities of those held within its walls. Media coverage has repeatedly highlighted its most notorious inmates, cementing its status as the prison of last resort. This reputation affects everything. Transfers into Wakefield are rare and deliberate. Once an inmate arrives, moving out is difficult. Risk labels follow them. Classification reviews are cautious. A single incident can halt progression indefinitely. For many inmates, Wakefield becomes permanent, even if their sentence technically allows for transfer. The physical environment reinforces this sense of finality. The architecture is functional, oppressive, and deliberately uninspiring. Corridors are narrow. Doors are heavy. Natural light is limited. The outside world feels distant and unreachable. Time behaves differently here. Days are long. Silence is common. Activity is minimal. Without meaningful goals, the mind turns inward. Some inmates reflect. Others obsess. A few unravel. The prison does not intervene unless behavior becomes disruptive. In Wakefield, stability is not the same as well-being. Relationships between inmates are cautious at best. Trust is dangerous. Many prisoners know exactly why others are here and what they have done. The knowledge creates distance, suspicion, and silence. Violence is not constant, but the threat of it never disappears. This is a prison filled with individuals who have already demonstrated extreme capacity for harm. Control depends on separation, monitoring, and rapid response. Wakefield operates like a pressure chamber. It does not explode often, but when it does, the consequences are severe. Staff operate under constant vigilance. Fatigue is common. Errors are costly. The margin for mistake is thin. Every day is managed, not lived. From the outside, Wakefield is often reduced to its nickname. From the inside, it is something else entirely, a place where the worst crimes meet the strictest control, and where life is defined not by redemption, but by restraint. This is only the surface. Because to understand Wakefield fully, you have to understand what it means to live among people the system has already decided should never return to society. And that story goes much deeper. At HMP Wakefield, the concept of time carries a different weight. This is not a prison where inmates count down days to release or plan futures beyond the walls. For many, time stretches forward without an endpoint, shaped by sentences that guarantee permanent confinement. Wakefield holds a significant number of inmates serving whole-life orders. These sentences remove the possibility of parole entirely. There will be no hearings, no reassessments, no second chances. For these men, the justice system has decided that confinement is permanent. This certainty changes everything. When release is impossible, the incentives that govern behavior in other prisons disappear. Good behavior does not lead to freedom. Programs do not open doors. Progress is measured only by how smoothly an inmate can exist within the system. For some, this leads to withdrawal. Without a future to work toward, motivation fades. Days blur into one another, marked only by meals, lockup, and brief periods of controlled movement. Routine becomes both anchor and cage. Others respond differently. Some inmates attempt to exert control over whatever small aspects of life remain. Personal rituals become rigid. Schedules are followed obsessively. Any disruption, no matter how minor, feels threatening. The prison environment reinforces these responses. Wakefield offers little stimulation. Association time is limited and carefully managed. Group activities are rare, especially for inmates considered highly dangerous. Social interaction is treated as a risk factor rather than a necessity. This isolation is not always total, but it is persistent. Inmates may see others during exercise or movement, but interaction is often minimal. Conversations are short, guarded, and superficial. Trust is dangerous in a place where reputations are defined by crime and where knowledge can be used as leverage. The presence of child killers and serial offenders creates a unique internal tension. Even within a prison designed to contain dangerous individuals, hierarchy exists. Some crimes carry heavier stigma than others. This leads to further separation, both enforced and voluntary. Wakefield manages this tension through constant classification and reclassification. Inmates are assessed not only on behavior, but on perceived threat. Housing decisions are cautious. Movement patterns are adjusted to avoid contact between incompatible prisoners. The result is a prison that feels fragmented. Inmates exist alongside one another, but rarely together. For staff, this environment demands constant vigilance. Officers at Wakefield are trained to anticipate rather than react. Every interaction carries potential risk. Complacency is dangerous. Familiarity is discouraged. Unlike in lower security prisons, officers cannot rely on routine alone. Each inmate is treated as a potential threat, regardless of outward behavior. Calm does not equal safety. This pressure takes a toll. Staff burnout is a persistent issue. Working daily among individuals convicted of extreme violence creates emotional strain. Officers are exposed to disturbing histories, graphic case files, and constant low-level tension. Support systems exist, but the environment remains demanding. Mistakes at Wakefield carry serious consequences. A lapse in supervision, a misjudged interaction, or a procedural failure can escalate quickly. As a result, officers often default to caution. Restrictions remain tight. Privileges are limited. For inmates, this means progress is slow and uncertain. Even those who behave consistently may see little change in their conditions. Risk classifications are sticky. Once labeled dangerous, shedding that label is difficult. This reinforces the sense of permanence. Mental health concerns deepen under these conditions. Whole-life prisoners, in particular, face the challenge of finding meaning without hope of release. Some turn to religion, others to writing, reading, or solitary reflection. A few attempt to mentor others, though opportunities are limited. But not all inmates adapt successfully. Depression is common. Emotional detachment becomes a survival mechanism. Some inmates report feeling disconnected from their own identities, as if life has narrowed to a series of procedures rather than experiences. Self-harm incidents occur, though often quietly. The prison responds through monitoring and restriction. Observation increases. Items are removed. Contact is reduced. Again, the focus is on containment, not resolution. Wakefield does not aim to rehabilitate its most dangerous inmates in the traditional sense. The system operates under the assumption that risk cannot be eliminated, only managed. Treatment is secondary to control. This approach has supporters and critics. Supporters argue that Wakefield keeps society safe by isolating individuals who have demonstrated extreme capacity for harm. They point to the prison's ability to maintain order among some of the most dangerous offenders in the country. Critics argue that permanent containment without meaningful psychological intervention creates long-term harm, not only to inmates, but to staff and the system itself. They question whether stability achieved through isolation truly constitutes justice. Inside Wakefield, these debates feel distant. Inmates live day to day. Officers manage shift to shift. The prison continues operating according to rules set far beyond its walls. The architecture reflects this philosophy. There is nothing ornamental about Wakefield. It is functional, controlled, and intentionally bleak. The environment communicates seriousness. Comfort is not a priority. Natural light is limited. Outdoor views are restricted. Even when inmates are outside, they are enclosed. The sky is visible, but freedom is not. This physical confinement mirrors the psychological one. Over time, the outside world fades. News events pass without emotional impact. Cultural references lose relevance. Technology advances beyond familiarity. The prison becomes the primary frame of reference. For inmates serving whole-life orders, this fading is irreversible. There is no need to prepare for reintegration. There is no expectation of change. Life is reduced to endurance. Yet even in this environment, human behavior persists. Some inmates attempt to assert dominance within their limited spaces. Others seek control through compliance. A few maintain intellectual engagement, reading extensively or writing. These efforts do not change their circumstances, but they provide structure. Wakefield allows just enough activity to prevent collapse, but not enough to create momentum. This balance is deliberate. The prison's goal is not transformation. It is stability. As long as inmates remain controlled, the system considers itself successful. But stability comes at a cost. The longer inmates remain inside Wakefield, the more difficult it becomes to separate who they were from where they are. Identity merges with confinement. The prison does not simply hold people, it reshapes them. And for those who will never leave, that reshaping is permanent. This is the reality inside the monster mansion. And it raises a question that has no easy answer. What happens when a system is designed not to change people, but to contain them forever? That question sits at the center of Wakefield's existence. And it does not end here. Living inside HMP Wakefield means existing in close proximity to people whose crimes have permanently separated them from society. This reality creates a unique and unstable environment, one that the prison must manage carefully to prevent collapse. Unlike other prisons where numbers offer protection, Wakefield minimizes collective power. Inmates are rarely allowed to form large groups. Movement is staggered. Association is limited. Even exercise is often conducted in small numbers or alone. The goal is simple: prevent alliances from forming and reduce opportunities for conflict. This approach shapes how inmates coexist. There is little sense of community. Relationships are transactional, cautious, and often temporary. Inmates learn quickly that curiosity can be dangerous. Asking questions about someone's crime, sentence, or background crosses unspoken boundaries. Silence becomes a form of self-defense. Many prisoners know exactly why others are there. Media coverage has made some crimes infamous. The knowledge creates tension that never fully disappears. Even without overt violence, hostility simmers beneath the surface. Wakefield manages this tension through constant separation. Housing assignments are adjusted frequently. Inmates are moved to avoid escalating conflicts. Transfers between wings happen quietly, often without explanation. For inmates, this instability adds another layer of stress. There is no sense of permanence, even within confinement. The cell may change. Neighbors may change. The rules remain the same, but the environment shifts subtly. The prison also relies heavily on intelligence gathering. Officers monitor behavior, listen for patterns, and track changes in mood or routine. Information comes from observation rather than informants. The goal is early detection of risk. When incidents do occur, they are handled swiftly and decisively. Violence at Wakefield is rare compared to lower security prisons, but when it happens, it is serious. The individuals housed here are capable of extreme harm. As a result, any loss of control is treated as a major event. Responses are immediate. Units are locked down. Inmates are isolated. Investigations begin. Privileges are suspended. The system tightens until stability is restored. These incidents reinforce the prison's core philosophy: prevention over reaction. Wakefield is designed to reduce the likelihood of crisis, not respond to it publicly. Staff operate under constant psychological pressure. Working daily among individuals convicted of extreme crimes affects perception and emotional resilience. Officers must remain professional while being acutely aware of the potential danger around them. This environment creates emotional distance. Empathy is controlled. Conversations are brief. Personal details are not shared. The boundary between staff and inmate is rigid. For officers, maintaining this boundary is essential for safety. But over time, it contributes to emotional fatigue. Burnout rates are high. Support services exist, but the work remains demanding. Wakefield's culture discourages complacency. Every shift is treated as a fresh risk assessment. Officers are trained to expect unpredictability, even during calm periods. Stability is never assumed. For inmates, this vigilance translates into constant monitoring. Cameras track movement. Records are updated. Behavior is scrutinized. Nothing is overlooked. This constant observation shapes self-awareness. Inmates learn to regulate not only their actions, but their expressions. Anger is hidden. Frustration is suppressed. Emotional displays attract attention, and attention brings restriction. Over time, many inmates adopt emotional neutrality as a survival strategy. They become quieter, flatter, less expressive. This is not peace, it is adaptation. Wakefield also manages inmates with severe mental health needs. Some prisoners suffer from psychosis, severe personality disorders, or long-term trauma. These conditions complicate confinement in a high-security environment. Treatment options are limited. Secure hospitals exist, but transfers are rare and difficult. Wakefield must manage mental illness within a prison framework designed for control, not care. This creates ethical tension. Officers are not clinicians, yet they interact daily with individuals who are psychologically unstable. Decisions must balance safety with humanity. In some cases, inmates deteriorate visibly. Speech becomes erratic. Behavior becomes repetitive. Isolation deepens symptoms. The prison responds with increased monitoring, not increased freedom. Again, containment takes priority. Wakefield's reputation ensures constant scrutiny from the public and media. Any incident involving a high-profile inmate attracts attention. As a result, the prison operates under pressure to avoid mistakes. This pressure influences decision-making. Risk assessments err on the side of caution. Transfers are delayed. Privileges are restricted. The system becomes increasingly conservative. For inmates, this means conditions rarely improve. Even those who demonstrate long-term compliance may see little change. Whole-life prisoners, in particular, have limited incentive pathways. With no release possible, the system focuses solely on preventing deterioration rather than enabling growth. Some inmates attempt to maintain intellectual engagement. Reading becomes a lifeline. Writing offers structure. Legal work provides purpose. These activities do not change outcomes, but they give form to time. Others struggle to find meaning. Without progress or hope, days become burdensome. Sleep patterns shift. Motivation declines. Life narrows. Wakefield allows just enough autonomy to prevent collapse, but not enough to inspire transformation. This balance keeps the system functioning, but it raises questions about long-term impact. The prison's design reflects this philosophy. Every feature serves control. Comfort is secondary. Humanity is managed rather than nurtured. From the outside, Wakefield appears calm. Inside, the calm is maintained through constant effort, restriction, and vigilance. This is not a prison that erupts often. It is a prison that holds pressure. And pressure, when sustained over years, leaves marks that are not immediately visible. For inmates who will never leave, Wakefield becomes the final environment shaping their identity. The person who entered gradually dissolves into the routine. The world beyond the walls becomes theoretical. The monster mansion does not need to assert its power loudly. Its power lies in permanence. And that permanence defines everything that happens inside. As time passes inside HMP Wakefield, the prison's most defining feature becomes impossible to ignore: permanence. Unlike other institutions where inmates move through phases, entry, progression, preparation for release, Wakefield exists largely outside that framework. For many of the men inside, there is no next stage. This permanence reshapes how inmates understand themselves. In most prisons, identity is tied to the future. Inmates imagine who they might become after release, how they will rebuild, what they will do differently. At Wakefield, those narratives collapse. Without a future beyond the walls, identity turns inward. Life becomes about managing the present, not preparing for change. This inward turn often manifests as emotional withdrawal. Inmates speak less. They react less. They avoid engagement not because they are calm, but because engagement offers little reward. Silence becomes safer than expression. For those serving whole-life orders, the psychological burden is heavier still. These inmates know with certainty that they will die inside the prison system. There will be no parole hearing to attend, no chance to demonstrate rehabilitation, no moment when freedom becomes a possibility. The justice system's decision is final. This knowledge strips behavior of its usual incentives. Compliance does not lead to release. Improvement does not alter outcome. The only reward for following rules is stability. And stability becomes survival. Wakefield's regime reinforces this reality through routine. Days are highly structured. Wake-up times, meals, movement, and lock-up occur on schedule. There is little variation. The predictability is deliberate. Routine prevents chaos. It also prevents momentum. Without milestones or goals, time loses texture. Days feel identical. Weeks disappear without distinction. Even years pass quietly, marked only by administrative reviews that rarely change conditions. For many inmates, this creates a sense of suspended existence. Life does not feel like it is progressing or regressing. It feels paused. The prison system interprets this pause as success. A stable inmate is a manageable inmate. The absence of incident is evidence that the system works. But stability does not mean well-being. Psychologists working in high-security environments often note that prolonged containment without purpose can lead to emotional numbing. At Wakefield, this numbing is common. Inmates describe feeling detached from their own emotions, as if reactions have been dulled by repetition. This emotional flattening reduces conflict, but it also reduces humanity. Wakefield's management style does not prioritize personal growth. Programs exist, but access is limited and outcomes are constrained by sentence type. For whole-life prisoners, participation does not alter fate. It merely fills time. Some inmates embrace these activities anyway. Reading becomes a form of escape. Writing provides structure. Legal work offers intellectual engagement. These pursuits do not promise freedom, but they offer meaning. Others struggle to find even this. Depression deepens. Motivation fades. The effort required to maintain basic routines feels overwhelming. Sleep patterns deteriorate. Appetite changes. Life becomes heavier. The prison responds with monitoring rather than intervention. Observation increases. Movement may be reduced. Medication is adjusted. The system stabilizes behavior without addressing cause. This approach reflects Wakefield's core philosophy: prevent disruption at all costs. The presence of extreme offenders also influences how discipline is applied. Punishments are measured carefully. Excessive force is avoided not out of compassion, but out of necessity. Escalation is dangerous when dealing with individuals capable of severe violence. Instead, discipline takes procedural forms. Privileges are removed. Movement is restricted. Segregation is imposed. The response is quiet but firm. Segregation at Wakefield is especially isolating. Inmates place their experience even greater separation from others. Human contact is minimal. Time outside the cell is limited. Sensory deprivation increases. Segregation is justified as a safety measure, but its psychological impact is profound. Prolonged isolation intensifies existing mental health issues and can create new ones. The prison accepts this risk as part of containment. For staff, managing segregation units is one of the most challenging aspects of the job. Officers must monitor inmates closely while maintaining distance. Every interaction carries risk. Emotional detachment becomes a defense mechanism. This detachment, however, accumulates over time. Officers report fatigue, cynicism, and emotional blunting similar to that experienced by inmates. The environment shapes everyone inside it. Wakefield staff operate under the knowledge that mistakes can be catastrophic. A single error could result in serious injury or death. This awareness reinforces strict adherence to protocol. Flexibility is limited. Compassion must be measured. Trust is rare. For inmates, this means the system rarely adapts to individual needs. The rules apply universally, regardless of circumstance. Exceptions are dangerous precedents. This rigidity maintains order, but it also limits humanity. The outside world often misunderstands Wakefield. Popular culture imagines high-security prisons as violent, chaotic places filled with constant confrontation. Wakefield is the opposite. It is quiet, controlled, tense. Its violence is potential rather than constant. This tension shapes daily life. Inmates are aware of the danger around them, even when nothing happens. Staff remain alert even during calm periods. The absence of incident does not reduce vigilance. Over years, this sustained tension leaves marks. Inmates who entered Wakefield with strong personalities often become subdued. Confidence erodes. Emotional expression diminishes. Identity shifts from individual to inmate. This transformation is rarely visible from the outside. There are no dramatic breakdowns in most cases. The change is gradual, almost imperceptible. But it is permanent. For those who will never leave, Wakefield becomes the final environment shaping their psychology. The prison's values, control, restraint, predictability, become internalized. Life narrows. The monster mansion does not need to enforce obedience through fear alone. Time does the work. Repetition does the work. Permanence does the work. And as years pass, the question is no longer whether inmates can survive Wakefield. The question becomes what part of them survives it. That question hangs quietly over the prison, unanswered. And it is this silence, more than any act of violence, that defines HMP Wakefield. As years accumulate inside HMP Wakefield, a quiet transformation takes place, not just in the inmates, but in the very meaning of punishment. What begins as a sentence imposed by the court slowly becomes something deeper, a condition of existence. For prisoners serving whole-life orders, the passage of time does not soften the reality of their confinement. Instead, it reinforces it. Every year lived inside Wakefield confirms what was decided long ago, that society has permanently withdrawn its permission for them to return. This knowledge settles heavily. Inmates learn to stop asking questions that have no answers. Appeals become distant memories. Legal language loses relevance. The idea of progress fades, replaced by the simpler goal of maintaining equilibrium. At Wakefield, equilibrium is everything. The prisoner systems are designed to keep individuals stable enough to coexist in extreme proximity without collapse. This requires constant balance. Too much restriction leads to breakdown. Too much freedom creates risk. The margin between the two is narrow. Officers walk this line daily. Every decision, when to allow association, when to impose segregation, when to intervene, is guided by risk calculations. These calculations are not abstract. They are informed by case histories, psychological reports, and patterns of behavior observed over years. Inmates are never just individuals. They are risk profiles. This classification system shapes every aspect of life. Housing assignments, movement schedules, access to activities, all are determined by perceived threat. An inmate's behavior today is interpreted through the lens of their worst act. This is one of Wakefield's defining features. The past never releases its grip. In other prisons, time can soften perceptions. Good behavior accumulates. Trust is slowly rebuilt. At Wakefield, trust is provisional at best. It can be withdrawn instantly. This creates a constant state of caution. Inmates learn that consistency is the safest path. Emotional restraint becomes second nature. Anger is dangerous. Curiosity is risky. Silence protects. Over time, these survival strategies reshape personality. Some inmates describe feeling hollow, as if parts of themselves have been switched off to conserve energy. Others report a sense of shrinking, life reduced to a narrow corridor of acceptable behavior. The prison does not discourage this adaptation. It relies on it. Wakefield functions best when inmates regulate themselves. External control is costly and dangerous. Internal control is efficient. This internalization of restraint is perhaps the prison's most powerful tool. Even during rare moments of autonomy, a walk, a shower, a brief conversation, inmates carry the rules with them. The prison exists not only around them, but within them. For staff, this dynamic is both success and burden. On one hand, a compliant population reduces incidents. On the other, it creates an environment where emotional disengagement becomes the norm. Officers interact with men whose lives have been compressed into routine, whose identities have been flattened by permanence. Maintaining professionalism in this context requires emotional distance. Officers cannot afford to dwell on crimes or futures. They focus on procedure. Procedure offers safety, but procedure also limits connection. Over years, staff members report feeling detached not only from inmates, but from their own emotions. Exposure to extreme offenders and long-term confinement environments shapes perception. Cynicism grows. Optimism fades. The prison affects everyone inside it. Wakefield's approach to rehabilitation reflects this reality. Programs exist, but they are framed as management tools rather than pathways to release. Behavioral courses aim to reduce risk, not prepare for freedom. For whole-life prisoners, participation is often symbolic. Completion does not change sentence length or classification. It offers structure, not transformation. This raises uncomfortable questions. If a person will never leave, what is rehabilitation meant to achieve? Is it ethical to offer programs without outcomes? Or is stability itself the goal? Wakefield answers this implicitly through its operation. Stability is enough. From the institution's perspective, success is measured in days without incident. Calm is the objective. Silence is acceptable. For inmates, this means life becomes a long exercise in containment. Some attempt to resist psychologically. They refuse to let the prison define them entirely. They engage in intellectual pursuits. They maintain personal codes. They find meaning where they can. Others surrender to routine. They stop imagining alternatives. The prison becomes the only reality. Neither response changes the outcome. The outside world continues without them. Political landscapes shift. Technology advances. Cultural norms evolve. Wakefield remains largely unchanged. This disconnect deepens the sense of isolation. Even when inmates follow news, it feels distant, irrelevant. Life beyond the walls belongs to another world. This separation is reinforced by physical design. The prison's architecture discourages connection to the outside. Windows are narrow. Views are controlled. The horizon is hidden. Even the sky, when visible, feels framed and distant. Wakefield does not allow nostalgia to flourish. The past is present only as record. Case files, reports, and sentences define identity more than memories. For some inmates, this leads to an erosion of self. They become what the system sees: a risk, a category, a number. Personal history fades. This erosion is gradual and difficult to observe from the outside. There are no dramatic moments of surrender. The change happens quietly, over years. This quietness defines Wakefield. Unlike prisons marked by riots or scandals, Wakefield rarely appears in headlines for internal chaos. Its success lies in preventing visible failure. But absence of failure is not the same as presence of justice. Critics argue that permanent containment without meaningful hope risks creating a form of psychological death. Supporters argue that society must be protected from individuals who have demonstrated irreversible danger. Wakefield exists at this intersection. It is not designed to resolve this debate. It is designed to operate regardless of it. Inside, inmates live with the consequences of decisions made long before they arrived. Staff enforce policies shaped by public fear, political pressure, and legal frameworks. No one inside Wakefield controls the system. They exist within it. And as years turn into decades, the prison's defining feature remains unchanged. It is not a place of redemption, but of endurance. The Monster Mansion does not promise change. It promises control. And control, sustained long enough, becomes a condition that reshapes everything it touches. This is the reality Wakefield maintains day after day, year after year. And it leaves one final question lingering, not loudly, but persistently. What does justice look like when containment becomes permanent? That question remains unanswered.